June 14, 1658. The coast of Dunkirk. 6,000 English soldiers stared up at an impossible slope. Above them, Europe's finest infantry, Spanish Tercios, who had never known defeat, waited with casual confidence for another routine slaughter. These weren't the Spanish veterans' usual enemies. These red-coated English troops had cut off a king's head, toppled an empire, and revolutionized warfare itself. Now they faced their ultimate test against continental Europe's military elite. No army had ever successfully stormed these towering sand dunes. Every military manual declared such an assault suicide. But as English battle hymns echoed across the beach and Cromwell's redcoats began their advance, something extraordinary was about to happen. This is the story of how English soldiers achieved the impossible and shattered Europe's most legendary infantry in 2 hours of pure combat genius. This is the story of the Battle of the Dunes. But before we witness those red-coated soldiers charging up impossible sand dunes, before we see Europe's most feared infantry formations crumble under English discipline, we need to understand how this most unlikely alliance brought Cromwell's army to continental battlefields for the first time in over a century. And if this combination of revolutionary warfare and tactical brilliance appeals to you, make sure to subscribe. We explore the campaigns where English military innovation challenged European orthodoxy, the battles that proved superior training and professional discipline could overcome any tradition. The strategic situation of the 1650s presented Europe with its most complex diplomatic puzzle since the Reformation. Two great power blocks dominated continental politics: the declining but still formidable Spanish Habsburg Empire, and ascending Bourbon France under Cardinal Mazarin's brilliant guidance. This created diplomatic opportunities that pragmatic statesmen couldn't ignore. Cardinal Mazarin recognised that Cromwell's England offered the perfect alliance to finally break Spanish dominance, despite religious differences between Catholic France and Puritan England. The resulting partnership became one of history's most successful marriages of convenience. Cromwell's motivations were starkly practical. Spanish-controlled Dunkirk had become a privateer haven that devastated English commerce, with Spanish raiders capturing or destroying nearly 2,000 English merchant ships in a single year. The Lord Protector's speech to Parliament describing Spain as a natural enemy to whatever belongs to the ways of God cleverly wrapped strategic necessity in religious justification. The secret treaty signed with France in 1657 and renewed in 1658 committed English forces to support French siege operations against Spanish strongholds in return for French recognition of the Commonwealth and delivery of Dunkirk to English control. This arrangement gave Cromwell the opportunity to deploy his new model army against European opponents while serving English strategic interests through French alliance. The war's most dramatic subplot involved England's own exiled royalty fighting alongside Spanish forces against their homeland's army. Charles II, still claiming the English throne despite his father's execution, had established his court in Spanish-controlled Bruges, where he assembled a royal army in exile, composed primarily of Irish, Scottish, and English Cavalier refugees who had fled Commonwealth persecution. This exile force, commanded by Charles's brother James, Duke of York, the future King James II, created the extraordinary situation where English soldiers would face their own countrymen in battle under foreign flags. The Battle of the Dunes thus represents the final European chapter of the English Civil Wars, as Cromwell's Roundheads and Charles's Cavaliers prepared for their ultimate confrontation on continental soil. The strategic irony was profound. Catholic Spain sheltered Protestant English royalists, while Catholic France allied with Puritan English republicans. Religious ideology had yielded to political necessity as European powers manoeuvred for advantage in the struggle that would determine continental dominance for the next century. The force that landed in Flanders represented something entirely new in European warfare: the world's first truly professional national army. Cromwell's new model army, established in 1645, had revolutionised military organisation through systematic application of meritocratic principles that swept away centuries of aristocratic military privilege. Unlike traditional European armies where officer commissions were purchased or inherited, The new model army promoted based on demonstrated battlefield competence. This revolutionary system created a professional officer corps whose authority derived from proven ability rather than social status, generating unprecedented levels of military effectiveness among men who had earned their positions through merit alone. The army's rank and file reflected this professional ethos through standardized equipment, regular pay, and uniform appearance that distinguished them from the ragged mercenary bands that characterized most European forces. The famous Redcoats weren't merely clothing, but symbols of systematic organization, professional identity, and state authority that marked these soldiers as representatives of an entirely new military paradigm. Religious motivation provided the army's spiritual foundation through Puritan beliefs that emphasized personal responsibility, collective discipline, and divine mission. Soldiers who began each battle with hymn singing and ended successful actions with prayer services brought ideological commitment that mercenary forces could never match, creating esprit de corps that transformed military units into instruments of revolutionary change. Combat experience gained during the civil wars had tested these innovations against domestic opponents, but the Dunkirk campaign would provide their first trial against Europe's finest professional soldiers. The reputation of Spanish Tercios, infantry formations that had dominated European battlefields for over a century, would test whether English military reforms could compete with established continental excellence. The siege of Dunkirk began in May 1658, when Marshal Turenne's combined Franco-English force of approximately 20,000 men invested the Spanish stronghold while English naval vessels blockaded the port from the sea. The operation required overcoming both formidable fortifications and challenging geographical conditions that tested Allied cooperation and logistical capabilities. Spanish defenders had flooded the surrounding countryside by opening sluice gates, creating waterlogged terrain that hampered artillery movement and complicated assault preparations. Allied forces found themselves operating in knee-deep mud and standing water while attempting to position siege guns and maintain supply lines through what amounted to artificial swampland. English naval support proved decisive in maintaining the siege's effectiveness by preventing Spanish relief attempts from the sea while providing artillery support from offshore positions. The coordination between Turenne's land forces and English naval vessels demonstrated the alliance's practical effectiveness despite ideological differences between the partners. Spanish relief efforts centred on Don Juan of Austria, commanding a mixed force of Spanish regulars and English exiles determined to break the siege before Dunkirk's garrison collapsed. Don Juan's strategic error lay in prioritising speed over firepower, advancing without his artillery train to achieve tactical surprise, but sacrificing the heavy guns that might have broken Allied positions. This decision to march without siege artillery reflected Spanish confidence in their infantry's ability to achieve victory through assault tactics alone. The miscalculation revealed how traditional military thinking failed to adapt to warfare's changing requirements, where professional infantry required artillery support to overcome prepared positions held by equally professional opponents. The approaching relief force created the perfect conditions for decisive battle, as Allied commanders recognized their opportunity to destroy Spanish field forces while maintaining their siege positions. The stage was set for European warfare's most significant infantry engagement since the 30 Years' War. The morning of June 14th found Spanish forces deployed along coastal sand dunes that rose approximately 150 feet above sea level, providing commanding views and defensive advantages that seemed to guarantee victory against any assault. These natural fortifications had protected the Spanish position, while offering observation posts that revealed every Allied movement across the surrounding flatlands. Spanish confidence reflected decades of successful defensive warfare, where tercio formations had repeatedly shattered attacking forces through disciplined firepower and coordinated pike charges. Their reputation as Europe's finest infantry stemmed from proven performance across multiple theatres, where Spanish discipline had overcome numerical disadvantages through superior professional competence. The tactical challenge facing Allied commanders appeared insurmountable, as conventional military wisdom dictated that uphill assaults against prepared positions resulted in massacre rather than victory. The combination of difficult terrain, Spanish defensive expertise, and established tactical doctrine suggested that any attack would achieve nothing beyond heavy casualties. Yet Cromwell's new model army had built its reputation by achieving victories that conventional wisdom deemed impossible. Their Civil War experience had taught them that disciplined infantry could overcome any defensive advantage through coordinated assault tactics that combined individual initiative with collective action under competent leadership. The assault assignment fell to English forces under Sir William Lockhart and Major General Morgan, who would lead approximately 6,000 Redcoats against the dune's highest point, where Spanish resistance would be strongest. The decision to assign this critical mission to English troops reflected both Turenne's recognition of their capabilities and the political necessity of demonstrating English military value to justify their alliance role. English soldiers advanced through shallow coastal waters toward the base of the sand dunes while Spanish defenders watched with professional interest, expecting to witness another textbook demonstration of defensive superiority over attacking forces. The sight of red-coated infantry formations moving steadily forward despite obvious disadvantages impressed Spanish observers who recognized courage even in anticipated victims. The assault itself defied every principle of military science, as English soldiers climbed shifting sand slopes under enemy fire while maintaining formation integrity that should have been impossible under such conditions. Spanish officers watched in amazement as attacking formations advanced uphill without losing cohesion despite terrain that made coordinated movement nearly impossible. English battle cries of "The Lord of Hosts" echoed across the dunes as Redcoats reached the summit and engaged Spanish Tercios in hand-to-hand combat that tested both formations' professional competence. The collision between Europe's most established infantry tradition and England's revolutionary military system created the moment that would determine continental warfare's future direction. Colonel Roger Fenwick's death leading the assault demonstrated the fierce nature of combat, as English officers led from the front, while Spanish veterans fought desperately to maintain positions they had never expected to lose. The casualty toll among English company commanders reflected their tactical doctrine of personal leadership under fire rather than directing attacks from safety. The breakthrough came when English pressure finally shattered Spanish defensive coordination, creating gaps in formations that had never been broken by conventional assault tactics. Spanish discipline, legendary throughout Europe, crumbled under sustained pressure from enemies whose own discipline proved equally formidable under the most challenging conditions. The psychological shock of seeing Tercio formations retreat down the dunes spread panic through Spanish ranks as soldiers witnessed the impossible achievement of their previously invincible infantry's defeat. Commanders who had built careers on Spanish military superiority suddenly found their tactical assumptions invalidated by enemies who had achieved what military science declared impossible. French cavalry exploitation of English infantry success demonstrated Allied coordination as Turenne's horsemen swept around Spanish flanks while English naval artillery pounded enemy reserves attempting to restore their broken line. The combination of English assault capabilities, French tactical mobility, and naval fire support created overwhelming pressure that Spanish forces couldn't withstand. The Duke of York's personal leadership of Spanish cavalry counterattacks showed desperate courage as Charles the King's brother attempted to rally collapsing formations through individual heroism. His failure to restore Spanish positions, despite risking capture or death, demonstrated how completely English tactical innovation had overcome traditional military methods. The battle's conclusion after only 2 hours of fighting emphasized the completeness of Spanish defeat, as formations that had dominated European warfare for over a century fled in disorder from enemies they had expected to destroy easily. The reversal of tactical expectations marked a turning point in military history that would reshape European power relationships for generations. The immediate aftermath of Spanish defeat created strategic opportunities that both Allied powers exploited ruthlessly. Dunkirk surrendered within days of the battle, as its garrison recognised the hopelessness of continued resistance after their relief forces' destruction, delivering to England the strategic prize that had justified Cromwell's European intervention. Louis XIV's personal delivery of Dunkirk's keys to English Governor Sir William Lockhart on June 24th symbolised France's recognition of English military contributions while securing French strategic objectives through alliance continuation. The ceremony demonstrated how successful partnerships could achieve mutual benefits despite ideological differences between participants. The broader strategic consequences extended far beyond immediate territorial gains, as Spanish military reputation suffered damage that affected their position across multiple theatres. European courts that had long feared Spanish military intervention now recognised that Spanish power could be challenged successfully by properly organised professional forces. The Treaty of the Pyrenees, signed in 1659, formalised Spain's strategic retreat, as harsh terms acknowledged French ascendancy over European affairs while confirming Spanish decline from great power status. France's acquisition of Artois, Roussillon, and other strategic territories marked the definitive end of Spanish hegemony over continental politics. England's retention of Dunkirk until 1662 provided a channel base that secured English commerce, while demonstrating the Commonwealth's ability to project military power beyond domestic waters. The port's eventual sale to France by Charles II after the Restoration reflected financial necessity rather than strategic wisdom. The Battle of the Dunes established tactical principles that would characterise English military doctrine for centuries afterward, proving that professional training and systematic organisation could overcome any defensive advantage when properly applied. This spirit of achieving impossible victories would echo through future English campaigns, but for now the Dunes belonged to Cromwell. The victory at Dunkirk established English military supremacy in ways that extended far beyond immediate battlefield success. Cromwell's new model army had proven that professional competence could defeat any traditional advantage, that systematic training trumped aristocratic privilege, and that English discipline could overcome Europe's finest formations. The Redcoat became a symbol of military excellence that other armies would attempt to emulate, marking the moment when English arms achieved recognition as Europe's new standard of infantry effectiveness. For Spain, the defeat marked the end of military dominance that had shaped European warfare for over a century. The myth of Tercio invincibility collapsed as formations that had never retreated fled from English assault. This psychological transformation affected Spanish confidence in all future conflicts, beginning an irreversible decline from great power status that no subsequent reforms could reverse. The Battle of the Dunes proved that military revolution could overcome established advantage when systematic innovation confronted traditional methods under proper leadership. Cromwell's new model army had demonstrated that professional competence trumped aristocratic privilege, that ideological motivation enhanced tactical effectiveness, and that institutional reform could create military capabilities that challenged any opponent. The red-coated soldiers who climbed those sand dunes carried more than weapons and equipment. They bore the hopes of a revolutionary society that had dared to reimagine governmental authority, military organisation, and individual opportunity. Their victory validated choices that had cost a king his life and a nation its traditional structure, while proving that change could produce strength rather than weakness. European military observers who witnessed Spanish formations retreat from English assault recognised that warfare itself had been transformed by opponents who refused to accept conventional limitations on tactical possibility. The lesson that professional discipline could overcome any defensive advantage would echo through centuries of subsequent conflict as English forces applied similar principles against other continental opponents. The strategic consequences extended beyond immediate territorial gains or diplomatic realignments as the balance of European power shifted definitively from Spanish to French dominance, while acknowledging English military capabilities that could influence continental affairs. The Commonwealth's brief moment of European intervention established precedents that would guide English strategic thinking throughout later imperial expansion. If this combination of revolutionary military innovation and tactical triumph appeals to you, campaigns where English professionalism overcame continental tradition, battles where superior training conquered established advantages. Victories that proved military excellence could emerge from systematic reform rather than inherited privilege. Then you know what to do. The Battle of the Dunes stands as testament to what English military genius could achieve when revolutionary organisation met tactical opportunity. Cromwell's Redcoats proved that no position was impregnable against disciplined assault, that European military reputations could be shattered by professional competence, and that English arms could triumph anywhere when guided by innovative leadership. Thank you for watching Britain's history. The battles where English military innovation conquered, established advantage and revolutionary discipline achieved the impossible, told with the detail and admiration they deserve.